and welcome back to Old School, where we believe everyone's older than someone and has something to teach that all of us can learn from, regardless of their age or social position or what they do as a profession. Today, we're going to have my writing coach, Bob Goff, who is just a hoot. He has so much wisdom in regard to just loving fellow humans and how to reach out and dream big. So I'm really looking forward to today's episode, and I think you'll enjoy it as well. I surround myself with an entire group of fabulous human beings who are at the top of their game and not only lift me up and inspire me and encourage me, but they also provide a service. And I call them my fantasy me team. They're like a fantasy football team, and each one of them has a position. My king and I have dispensed with subtlety, and he's indicated that it's time for me to reacquire a head coach. And the gentleman who's been tapped with that job is none other than Bob Goff. And he brings with him a special teams coordinator, Kimberly Stuart, who is just amazing. Bob is a recovering lawyer by self-description. He is a husband to Sweet Maria, a father, a grandfather, an author, a coach, a horse trainer, we don't want to forget that one, a sailor, and a chief balloon inflator. He's available. He puts his phone number in the back of all of his books, for heaven's sakes. And he's available because he wants each of us to tell our story and to live a loving life of purpose. So I'd like to have you welcome Bob Goff to class today, and hopefully we can get taught about how to live an undistracted life. Hey, Bob.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm so glad we're getting some time.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
So the last book of yours that I read was Undistracted, and I started off highlighting. I like real books, and I was highlighting in it, and I ended up highlighting so much it was time to put the marker down and just read and absorb. So, what are some of the overflying highlights of how we achieve that? How do we get to undistracted?
Yeah, well, most of us do live very distracted lives. I'm one of them. And so when you write books, you kind of write the book that you need. And so it was a really great experience for me to say, how can I move from this very distracted life I live on purpose? It's like I take calls from people. I have all the things that happen to you, that happen to your listeners. But how can I bring some focus about that? And so that was the idea of the book. And what I try to do is just tease out in different stories and different things, like a context. How do you get less distracted by work? Some of us have jobs that we've outgrown. And how can we get less distracted by changing jobs or relationships that are tricky? How do you just navigate the tricky ones?
Exactly. Like some of the things that really were making me stop in place. I love your declaration against distraction, but when it was just one sentence, come home to yourself.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder. Sometimes something like that will ping us and you'll say like, oh, that's actually a great reminder about who I want to be. And you can stop and say, gosh, how did I get here? It's just good little wake up.
Yeah. And during COVID, we all isolated, and I was feeling like I was being disobedient to finishing the story I'm supposed to be telling, the one that you're coaching me for. And I started isolating. I claimed it wasn't. I claimed I had a focus and that I had a reason for why I was doing that. But it started becoming relatively comfortable.
Yeah, totally.
And to the point where also I didn't want, I would like to see if the Lord had somebody for me to love for the rest of my life. I don't know, how that's going to be. But I started convincing myself that, do I really want somebody else in my grill 24/7, somebody I have to talk to about, every little thing that happens? And I can't live. Staying at home in a bubble isn't going to keep you from being distracted, number one.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. You think sometimes when you isolate, that it actually eliminates distraction, but I would argue that it might increase distraction because you have less of the prompts that are really good for your head and your heart to move forward. Yeah. While you say something, I realize I'm distracted because I'm looking at my battery's going to poop out. So let me just plug that in. Hang on one second.
Sure. Well, and when you're talk a lot about, what was the phrase? I wrote it down because I thought it was really cool that some people don't want to choose. Oh, most of us never decide to be happy.
Oh, yeah, you just never choose that. And it's almost like you get a little bit more agency and choice in this than you might give yourself credit for. But we actually get to decide to be happy. And I don't mean like with this kind of saccharine, like everything's great when it's not, to say it's really complicated. It's very hard sometimes. And in the midst of that, I'm going to choose some joy.
Well, and I have people around me, they'll ask me how I'm doing, and I say fabulous. And they're like, you can't always be fabulous, but they love it because that's kind of like my way of greeting people. But I tell them that it's not that I think life is puppies and rainbows. And once you get to read my book, you'll understand completely. I've never had puppies and rainbows. But I feel like you can either sit and soak in the victim mentality and never be happy, or you can make the choice. And I think making that choice, especially every morning after my quiet time with the Lord, is the way sets the tone for the day. I mean, who is going to enjoy meeting me? Who is going to enjoy having that undistracted encounter? You talk a lot about that too, about when you're meeting with people, being present with them. How do you I'm a 7. I know you're a 7, and we're looking for the next exciting thing, but how do you find a way to help yourself stay that in that conversation or in that time?
Yeah, sometimes what we're doing is we just got to understand what's the thing underneath the thing. Like, why are we doing what we're doing? And if we can figure that out, then that's like the biggest part of the battle. So just see, like, what if you're having an overreaction to something, understand what's that connected to? It might be that you're underreacting to so many things in your life that you're like, this is Gettysburg. So finding out what things are connected to in your life, it takes a moment, but I'm glad that you have that quiet time in the morning. You can kind of sort some stuff out to say, hey, what's really going on here? And not just the over thing, but if something really rubbed you wrong, or like, how come? If it makes something made you really giddy, say like, I wonder why I'm being so silly right now. And it might be just this like stress that's been pent up for so long that you need to find an outlet for that. And you just find it by just laughing a little bit.
Well, I couldn't go through the day without that. That's my oxygen, is some sort of laughter or, I know God has a sense of humor just by looking in the mirror, but
yes, totally.
But he makes my day. He just genuinely, and I can have that by myself, but I know that isolating isn't our purpose here. We can't love others like we love him from home. And unless I'm willing to get in a relationship with the prime delivery guy or the UPS guy, he's not bringing a man he has for me here either.
Yeah. And living in anticipation of what it is that might be around the corner. So I just think that would be an attribute I'd hope for everybody, that they live with a greater sense of anticipation of what might be possible in their life. Yeah.
And what another direction you were heading with in regard to that is that is so real and genuine that, I think you had a comment in regard to not missing the chance to meet what's actually real. And that, I think, is where the crux of it is. We try to manufacture happiness and joy out of things that are what we're actually doing is masking a tough time or something that we're going through. And one, I think we have to feel it out. And two, then, yes, take a quick dose of reality. I'm going through Philippians right now, and I do an inductive study when I do my Bible studies. That's for my own personal time. And I love chapter 4 when it talks about thinking on these things: what is noble, what is real, what is praiseworthy. I think when we head into conversations and meeting with other people, we can't love on them if we've got if we're thinking about predisposed thoughts and pre-expectations and things that we think they ought to act like or ought to be for each of us. And so That is been a great passage for me in really meeting what's real in other relationships.
Yeah, think about, you can even say, what are my assumptions and biases? That if you can understand, because we all have assumptions and biases. So figure out what those are. So if I am talking to somebody from the deep South, my assumption is that they're going to be a little bit more slow to speak. They'll say, well, there was this time that I was whatever. So, and I have a bias there in that I'm like on the move. I want to like make moves. I want to have a conversation, but it needs to be a little bit more up tempo. And so since you have an assumption and a bias that might not help that relationship, figure out what those are and then say, hey, can you send me an email? Because then they can go at their cadence and I can read at my cadence. So once you identify that, then you can avoid the awkward middle part, which is to say, like, dude, land the plane. And so it's part of it is just a self-awareness of just knowing, like yeah, these are my assumptions, these are my biases. And once you've been around the sun a couple of times, and that's why it would be such a benefit to find somebody like you in their life, because you know what your assumptions are and you know what your biases are. You're able to articulate those. And then you can steer people in beautiful ways towards really greater depth in relationship. Because I'm not going to get there having a super slow conversation with somebody in the South. Like, I'm not mad at them. I think it's really endearing. I like Jimmy Carter and the way that he addressed, even when inflation was like 18%, the way he said whatever he said, I just felt it really soothing. That said, I can't have a conversation with somebody and just be like, so write it down. And then I'll read at thousands of words per minute, and everybody gets what they need.
And nowadays, that's just the thing, isn't it? We have presuppositions and we're already assuming based on appearance or party or whatever it might be that somebody's already got a way about them. And it's so interesting when you meet somebody who completely flips that on its head. And maybe if we'd stop meeting them thinking that way. I just think having those expectations through one round of counseling for my marriage before it ended, the counselor had us get on the same side of the table because he said across is adversarial. And over here, he said, because you're all both assuming that each other doesn't have each other's best interest at heart. And I think nowadays, almost everybody's already that way before you even get to meet them.
I like that. Everybody on the same side of the table. It's like that Last Supper picture with Jesus. Except he leaned over and said, someone will betray me. And you're like, it was actually, you're like, you're right.
Who's and he said it to the one who would. So be careful if Jesus is leaning in.
Yes. Yeah. He's not whispering, how was your day? What are you ordering tonight? Get the lamb. It's awesome.
Yes, exactly. Well, for me, each one of your books has come, like my quarterback on my Fantasy Me team. She's my hairstylist, precious young believer. She recommended Dream Big to me.
Oh, honored. I'm just so glad that connected. And the thrust of Dream Big was just for all of your listeners to say, what was your ambition? And where an ambition and an opportunity cross, like that's where you want to be. So I just have many, many ambitions. And I've got my head on a swivel. And when I see an opportunity, I go like, oh my gosh, let's go. Let's do that.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it was at right in the heart of COVID. It was probably May of 20. And her salon had to lay everybody off because of, that was going to be a better way for them to get unemployment or something. Anyway. Yeah. So she knew I had helped people start businesses. I've been a bookkeeper. I've been an entrepreneur. And so she recommended it and I'm reading it. And then I'm helping her and a few other people literally start businesses at that time. And I created a small business consulting firm called Dreamweaver Creations because of, let's take those dreams and let's weave them. Let's get them out there. Yeah. And so it was again, another one I'm highlighting. And it's like, okay, Michele, get in the moment of the conversation. And I could do it like an inductive study Bible. read it once through, then go back and pick at everything. And it was just really an incredible recommendation. And so when Undistracted came out, I couldn't not pick it up, because your cadence, your style, the fact that it's not forcing like a Bible study situation as much as it is, take a look at your relationship with Christ, take a look at your relationship with him and yourself within the world, and how does that play into what your path or your journey might be. So I really, really have enjoyed both of them. My daughter gave me Love Does for this last Christmas, and I haven't read that.
Oh, fun. Well, it'll sound like me. And what we want to do is make sure that in the different areas of our life, we sound like us. So I was a trial lawyer for a quarter of a century, and I had the same approach and I think cadence and sentence structure that I do now. Like I was that guy, and was, but it's just in a different context. And so sometimes people will put on their religious voice and they'll use a bunch of words that just people don't use. The guy at the tire store doesn't say. There was a young guy that called me and I said, well, what is it that you want? And he said, I just want to glorify the Lord. And I'm like, what does that even mean? I'm not mad at it. It sounds swell. It sounds like something you'd hear at a Sunday school, but tell me what that means. Does that mean like obey, or does that mean like glorify? Does that mean like revere? Is it a combination of all those things? So I just rather find more and better and more precise words to describe what we're saying, find new words that you haven't used before. But instead of borrowing someone else's retread word, because it sounds like it's a big word and nothing at the same time. So I think we're not trying to wordsmith for other people, but just for me alone, what I'm trying to do is use more ordinary speak to describe what is complicated about relationships, to just say they're tricky.
They are.
And so then to have, I think you can have a conversation with the guy at the tire store about that. But if you say that, if you start with different personality disorders and codependency and all that, these would be concepts the guy at the tire store may not have been exposed to before. And so I'd rather just say they're tricky and then go to depth together, rather than use a bunch of words that sound very ivory tower. Now, again, they are very precise academic meanings, but I want to just get Jesus, just like he pointed to two sheep and he says, it's like when one of those gets away, and everybody knew exactly what he meant. So we don't have to use big words to describe big ideas.
Well, and he was talking, like you said, he was talking to shepherds. He met people where they were at. He's the original lifestyle evangelism. And to be able to have those conversations with people in their profession or in the way that they just go about their day. I feel the same way about I'm older. My team has told me not to call myself old, that that's besmirching God's creation. And I'm like, well, I am in fact old. I said,
what was that? They said like Abraham was old and Sarah was advanced in years. I love that. I'm just old.
I'm like, I have less time in front of me than I do behind me. And that's by choice too, because I don't want to live to 120.
Yeah, that's right.
But over the course of my life, there have been times when people thought they were using these wonderfully truthful, churchy, well-meaning things to say to me about things I had gone through or how to represent Jesus. And they were awful. It was awful. They shouldn't just open their mouth yet. And so that's how I feel a lot about Butterfly Stitches, my book, in regard to how I want to get that across, is that while my healer is my king, it's not about, all these churchy or even counseling psychology answers, because not once in my entire life was a counselor employed. Not once. Not when I was 5, not when none of it. Nobody came over, said, how you doing? You need some help? Walk me through it. I realized actually while I was doing some corrections that Kimberly gave me, that he truthfully, as in scripture talks about being that counselor, that comforter, he's been that from day one for me.
I'm just so glad you've taken the time to write the words because uh, you speak so conversationally, and I think people will feel invited. They can just feel safe and invited, and I think that's what we want. Most of us don't need more information. I don't need to go to church to get more information. What I want to do is feel some love and acceptance, and a place where I can be safe and authentic, and all that. And I don't care how many boats are floating the Sea of Galilee. I don't care how to say love in four different ways in the Greek. It doesn't agape, phileo. I could give rep. But to find ways or examples where people have loved one another well, that's inspiring. Like I want to see examples. I don't need information.
Yeah. I used to, and because of some things that happened in my childhood, I used to operate from where I thought was logical. And I just kept asking the Lord for more knowledge. And it's almost audible. I can hear him laughing. And every time pointing me back to the word of God. And he's like, look, I've given you 66 books of knowledge, and I've placed you within creation where you can learn from it and each other. What have you done with that?
Yeah, and you could point towards 7 books in the New Testament alone that we don't even know who wrote them, including Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You would think they gave some clues about who wrote it, but they're not even sure. And so I just am so okay with some of that ambiguity and not knowing the answer to a couple things. But there's a couple things that I'm certain about. I'm certain about the Jesus part. Some of the way that we work out collectively, me included, the Jesus part I'm a little uncertain about, but the Jesus part, I get that. So maybe just start with what you're certain about, and then expand out to some of the other things. I think what happens is people start on the 50th thing out, and because that's the most important thing to somebody else, then they're asking that to be the most important thing to you. And it just isn't. Like gay, straight, Buddhist, Baptist. I'm like, it's not that I don't have an opinion. I'm a lawyer. I have an opinion about everything, but it's just not the most important thing to me right now. And so somehow we're made to feel small or wrong or narrow-minded or something because that doesn't happen to be our most important thing. Yet I could ask them how many kids have been killed in Yemen this year. And I know the answer to that. Doesn't make me better. It's just that it's my most important thing. And I get it. It's not theirs. So I wouldn't expect them to feel bad. Yet their most important thing, they want that to be my most important thing. And it just isn't. So I think if we could ask people with a really genuine interest, like, tell me the most important thing to you. Don't give me a Sunday school answer, but like, your kids, the people you love, tell me what's most important to you. And it probably won't be the big issue of the day. And then you'll actually, by taking an interest in one another, you become less distracted by all the crazy, and you're just talking to a real live person, and you're talking about something that really matters to them. I love that.
I think for the most part, it's like when you were saying that, what occurred to me is like when there's a beauty beauty pageant, and they're all world peace and world hunger, and this is what we're going to cure. And I think can be distilled differently than that. And I think, in all honesty, if we really got past putting those expectations on each other, we'd probably sit down and realize we do have as what's the most important thing to each of us a lot closer than we think. It's just that we want to take whatever group you look like you're in and I look like I'm in, and kind of make some decisions ahead of time. And I have had conversations with people who I never thought would even start a conversation with me. Like when you're at the airport or places where there's more of a collective, and they just start chatting. The next thing you know, you're like parallel lives. And it's like, man, I'd marry this guy if he wasn't already married.
Exactly. Well, I think you nailed it. And I think your listeners are in for a treat with your podcast. I'm so glad you're doing it.
Well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate your recommending it. I'm not always a courageous person. My bravery and any courage I have totally comes from the Lord. I'm willing to be obedient. I have definitely in my life not been, and or drug my feet. And he pushes me through the door. He gets me there.
As with us all.
So anyway, I really do appreciate your being my coach. I appreciate Kimberly. You said we'd love her, and She is just something. She was
So
texting
good.
me and just giving me such encouragement. And I'm a
Mhm.
words of affirmation and a time person. So whenever
Come
you give me
on.
your time and you give me your words, man,
You're
my
happy.
tank is full. My tank is full. Well, I really
Okay.
appreciate you doing this for me, for you coming on and being my first guest.
So good. Thank you.
I was very nervous, but I feel like it's probably better that it be nervous me and, comfortable you than too nervous.
Totally. Just get the real version out there.
Exactly. Well, I really do appreciate your time, sir. I know it's
Thank
valuable,
you.
and I appreciate that you're willing to give of it. And
Well,
we will be talking very soon, I think, on our next call.
yeah. Blessings to you and all the people listening.
All right. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Having Bob on today's episode was awesome, and all of his contact information and social media platforms will be in the comments. We're really happy to have you here today. If you can go onto the podcast and review and rate, and maybe go check out our other platforms and give them a like or a subscribe, that would be awesome. I'm new to this podcast world, and I am looking forward to where the journey takes me. And it was Bob who recommended that, along with my book, this would be a great platform, along with speaking engagements, which I'm not really sure how that's going to roll. But I'm looking forward to every bit of the journey, and I'm so grateful for having him along for the ride. Thank you for coming to class today. And class dismissed.